Welcome back. Today I'm going to be giving you guys 5 tips that you guys can use to take your improvisational playing to the next level. So let's jump into it. So number 1, learn as many licks and phrases as you can. So learn some bluesy licks and phrases and apply those to your playing next time you have a bit of an improv session. So let's say a lick that you learned is in the first position of a minor pentatonic. So, let's say you learn this lick. So there's a bit of bending there. And so you want to apply that to your playing during one of your improvisational session. So let's say the track you're listening to and jamming out to is in B minor. So you would transpose that lick to. And if you just play like, it can be quite obvious if it's a very well-known lick or whatever. So what you can do, you can change up some of the phrasings a bit. So instead of a bend, you can do a slide. And you know that this note is the same as the 12th fret on B. Right, so you can kind of take some of these licks that you've learned and change them up a bit, change up the phrasings, and you can kind of make them your own during one of your improvisational sessions. So the more phrases and licks that you know, the more vocabulary you would have under your belt for whatever you're writing or improvising over. So number 2 would be triad. Now, triad, you can think of it as a stacked third, or you can think of it as having a root, a third, and a fifth. Right, so let's find a triad of a C minor chord. Right, so you have your C, and then you have your G, and then you have your D sharp. Right, so to turn that into a triad, you would find your root, and then you find your third, and then there's your fifth. And there is your C minor triad. And knowing your intervals and know where your octaves are, you can kind of figure out what the next inversion of a C minor triad would be. You need to find the octave higher up of C, so it would be on the 8th fret of the high E. Alright, so now we need to find the octave of D sharp, and knowing your octaves, you can pretty much just figure out, oh, my D sharp is right there. Alright, so you got those two down. So let's say where's G at? And you will find that it is also on the 8th fret, but it is on B. So you would get. So in just doing that, you can figure out all of the different inversions of C minor triad, a D minor, G major. The only difference between a minor and a major triad is the third. So in C minor, what makes this a C minor is the flattened third. To make it a major, you just raise that third a half step. So why am I telling you about triads? Now, triads are a great way to make your playing sound a bit more musical and less like running through a scale. So let's say you're improvising over something in C minor. Alright, so I have the chord progression recorded and set up in a loop. So I'm gonna hit play. Alright, so there are a couple of ways you can play over this chord progression. Now, since it is bouncing around in C minor, you can mess around in the C minor scale. can also mess around using Triad. So you have more route you can take, and not just being stuck in within the B minor pentatonic box. You can also do just a little bit of both. You can just play around it. You can just kind of just do whatever you want in that kind of situation, but knowing your triad can really help you expand outside of that little pentatonic box that a lot of guitar players find themselves to be stuck in. Another way you can take your improvisational playing to the next level is timing. You don't want to be playing too fast, but you also don't want to be playing too slow, so you have to find a little bit of a middle ground within the tempo and the time signature of the song you are playing in. So there are a few ways to practice your timing, and one of those is playing over a drum track or playing over a metronome. Alright, so I'm going to set up a little bit of an example for you guys here. So that lick I explained earlier. So just focus on timing and rhythm, and you will take your improvisational playing to the next level. Alright, so now let's move on to my next tip, and that is choosing the right notes. So let's focus on the context of a track that you might be improvising over. Alright, so is the track fast? Is it a major or a minor? And what is the overall mood of the track? So if you want to stick with the vibe of a song, you would want to stick around in the minor scale. And if it's slow, you would want to kind of allow the backing track to kind of breathe a little bit. You don't want to be kind of drowning it out with a whole bunch of so yeah, you don't want to be spamming a whole bunch of notes, and especially doing a sort of a mellow and slow jam track, right? So you don't want to be doing too much under that sort of circumstances. So let's say you're playing around to a backing track in G major. Alright, so you have G major, then A minor, and then C major, and then C minor. Now there's a little bit of a modal interchange happening on the C right here, because that third has been flattened to a minor third. So instead of it being a major C, it turns into C minor. Alright, so you kind of have to play a note outside of the G major scale. So when you're playing over a G major backing track, I'm gonna pull one up right now. So some notes will sound good underneath the chord and some won't. Especially this note right here for C, because that creates a little bit of a dissonance, and this is also known as a tritone. Right, so what is that? A, right? So it doesn't sound right. So what you would want to do is kind of stick with the voicing of the chord that is being played. So what I mean by that is you are playing the same note as the chord, right? So there's a G, there's a fifth, then the playing like the fifth of the chord, an octave of the chord, you can make it sound better and make it sound like you are hitting the right notes. So you want to make sure that you are picking the right notes carefully, and you don't want to create any kind of dissonance or tritones in areas where you don't want there to be any. So depending on the context and the mood of the song, if you want to create tension, dissonance in your playing with the music, you are allowed to do so. But if you want it to be a smooth and a laid back sort of jam session, hit all the right notes. You can't go wrong with hitting the triad of the chord, or just hitting the fifth or the octave or the third of whatever chord is being played. So after all, it's really up to you, and just don't forget to have some fun when you are improvising over a track. Alright, so now let's move on to the next tip, and this one is probably the most important tip out of this whole video, and that is to stay out of your head. Alright, so it is super easy to fall into that trap in your head where you start criticizing yourself about what you're playing, and you start overthinking things and start to think that maybe your playing is too boring, or you start to run out of ideas, and you start to wonder whether you're going too fast, too slow, whether you are playing in its right key. It takes practice to keep yourself from falling into that mindset loop where you're just constantly overthinking and wasting brain power and just constantly thinking you're just running through a scale and it sounds boring. And so one of the ways you can kind of keep yourself from falling into that mindset loop is focusing on the chords that are being played and focusing on the tempo, focus on what kind of subdivision or what kind of rhythm do you want to play in your lead, and kind of just get yourself out of that headspace. So eventually you will learn to enjoy what you're playing and just enjoy whatever you're playing and listening to. Practice makes progress. Alright, so those are the 5 tips that you can use to take your improvisational playing to the next level. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one, and if you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and also subscribe if you're new. I'll see you guys in the next video.